Hey, this is Rabbi Zev Bennett.
And Ariella and I.
Welcome to episode 4 of Embodied Torah. This episode is titled by popular demand, since it happens to be that it's that time of year, so we're going to be talking about a seasonal episode, even though this is also part of a series that is not necessarily a seasonal series, but it's the kind of thing that when you get exposed to the deeper side of how the Jewish calendar works, I think it's fair to say that even if it seems like it's seasonal because it is linked to the way the year works actually agriculturally, these things are macrocosms of the microcosmic versions of these things that we have inside of ourselves. So that's why it's not really a yearly thing in that microcosmic sense. So that's
right, but we're also supposed to be living with the times, and there are opportunities for growth throughout the Jewish calendar, and when we plug into them, it's transformative and chaval. It's chaval to miss out on those opportunities.
It's basically plugging into the time to get the opportunities, and then, but also to not let it make the series be too seasonal.
Correct.
But that's fine. Okay. So let's see. So what are we going to talk about with this episode in terms of Purim, Ariella?
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite time of year.
Yeah.
I get super excited about it. Well, we know that Chazal say that 30 days before Chag is when you're supposed to start preparing for that Chag. So we're about to begin Purim, and what's 30 days before Purim?
Tu B'Shvat.
Yeah.
Let's do the math on that, yeah.
Yeah, so we have Tu B'Shvat is the preparation for Purim.
That's funny, because actually usually whenever I think about 30 days before the Chag and Purim time, I'm always thinking about it's 30 days before Pesach. But yeah, I don't think I've ever, until you said that, I don't think I've ever once thought about how Tu B'Shvat is 30 days before Purim, and that can be viewed as some kind of preparation for Purim. So I guess how would you describe the preparation of Tu B'Shvat, specifically targeting Purim?
Excellent question. So, I mean, Tu B'Shvat, we usually brush it off as this minor holiday,
right.
Like go plant some trees and, but it's talking about the concept of rooting, of knowing where we're grounded, where we are planting ourselves. And if we think about roots are not just meant, they go deep into the earth, right? And they're not just meant to create stability so that when winds come, we don't topple over. They're also drawing nutrients up from the earth. So there's this relationship of going down into the earth in order to draw
that's cool.
Draw up. There's this relational, there's a relationship, a two-way relationship. It's not just one direction of I'm pressing down into the ground or just taking. It is digging deep in order to receive strength, sustenance, support.
Right. That's very deep, literally, but it's actually like that actually is very, like, just thinking about that in terms of how it's really, I mean, obviously there's a lot of discussion with Tu B'Shvat is how it's supposed to be that we are like trees, like it's kind of like that funny version of the pasuk. It's somewhere in Bamidbar about Ki Adam Hu Eitz HaSadeh.
Exactly.
But like when you actually think about that for a second, like the pattern of exploration of existence that we're constantly undergoing is digging deeper and deeper, trying to get to what's all the way at the root, which is the source of all life and energy, which is Hashem.
Right, but we're not meant to stay in the darkness of the earth. We're meant to draw that up in order to expand, in order to grow.
Right.
And it's also really interesting, the pasuk that you brought, Ki Adamu Etz HaSadeh. We're not a tree alone on a hilltop. We're not meant to exist on our own. Ki Adamu Etz HaSadeh. We're part of an orchard. We're part of a field, and we're meant to be connecting to be aware of the other trees around us, because when the roots go down, they intermingle with one another. We're drawing energy, we're drawing sustenance from the same earth. So who are we choosing to plant ourselves with? Mm-hmm. And that really starts to bring us into the energy of Purim as well.
Right. So I guess before we go to that, I was just thinking, just as you were talking about, like, just because Tu B'Shvat is almost like the turning point in the winter, whereas you're kind of going from the going into winter to starting to climb out of winter. And so I guess like just like as a general background, just to sort of like the whole patterning of the agricultural calendar, the Jewish calendar, and the agricultural patterns of like the just I guess the country or nature. So like it's almost like there's these waves, so it's kind of like you have if we start from the winter, so you have basically it's right after Sukkot, then you get into like we're climbing down into darkness basically, but then the turning point is there where you basically start going back towards springtime, and then Adar is like it's the ending of the winter where it's still cold and it's still very like you're kind of waiting for the transition to the next phase, and that's why it's the month that's full of tension, where it's like the things that are all there in potential are still like buried underneath, and then we're waiting for them to burst out. and then they do burst out finally in Nisan, and then really Nisan is the beginning of this then, because then it's like, well, then now we had that big reveal, and then it kind of builds into whatever Shavuos is, and like basically it's like you have these patterns in the year. Yeah. So I guess like that we'll come back to that macro picture as we build this out, because right now we're kind of like microing it specifically in the area of Tu B'Shvat going into Purim, then going into Pesach. But so I guess what you're basically saying is Tu B'Shvat is like the middle of the winter, and then it's like this. It's like a preparation phase.
It's before the flowers have really begun revealing themselves, especially this year. Tu B'Shvat, the Shkediot were not blossoming yet. Right. But we know that the real deep inner work is taking place. I think Chazal say that the sap begins to flow around Tu B'Shvat. There's internal movement taking place, even though it hasn't yet been revealed, right? And already now at Purim time, we're seeing flowers blossoming. Mm-hmm. You go around, you can see it's so beautiful. It's not in its full blossom like we're going to experience during Pesach, but it's there.
Right.
And that's part of this transition. We're all in charge of doing our own internal work that other people are not necessarily going to see. But then Purim comes. And what's Purim all about? What are the mitzvot of Purim?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Matanot le'evyonim, mishloach manot, kriyat Megillah. We're meant to be seudat Purim. We're supposed to be interacting with one another. That it can't just be, I'm doing all of this internal work and I'm staying and just me and Hashem and I got this. No, we have to be interacting with one another. So if we want to experience the heights of Purim, right? We need to know where we're grounded. We need to know where we're drawing our sustenance and our support and our inspiration from. And we need to be connecting and expanding outward to our friends and our community and our non-friends.
Right.
Right? There's a big tikkun that we're supposed to be giving mishloach manot, and I'm going to eat your food.
Right.
And I'm going to trust you and I'm going to feel connected to you, because that's the point of Purim.
And it's really putting yourself out there. It's actually, we can call that branching out, to use the tree analogy. But that's actually what it is, right? Because let's go all the way. It's a great pun. Let's just go. Like branching out, that's what you're doing. It's like you're basically, how often do you just go to your neighbors? I remember when we first moved into our house when I was little, like in Highland Park, and our neighbors they were not Jewish. They just came over and they brought us, like, I think it was an apple pie. We did not know them at all. And I was like, this is, like, at the time I was obviously not thinking very sophisticatedly about this. But I was like, that's really nice. And then, like, as I think about it now, I'm like, that's exactly the kind of thing that you just think, oh, someone's moving in across the street. I don't know them at all. I'll just now branch out, and now we're going to get to know each other, and you give someone food. It's a great way to do that. So you really see that happening there. So that's very cool. I guess I was also going to, it's something that you said in terms of the the being rooted, but then also being in Purim, is that Purim always seems like it operates, like in the future, like every day is Purim. Like Olam HaBa is like basically a combination of Purim and Shabbos. It's like Shabbos is, it's supposed to be like Olam HaBa is Yom Shekulo Aroch U'Menucha L'Chei Olamim. It's like it's Shabbos, but it's also Purim, and the reason for that is because the whole, like the theme is that Purim is like a normal day where you just see what's on the surface, but that normalcy is like also simultaneously being perceived through the da'at, the perception of Hashem's presence. And that's, we discussed a little bit before, like just in earlier episodes, like looking at somebody when you're talking to them, and like you see the eyes, you see their body, but then there's the self that is sort of shining through. And to be able to see both of those like in synchrony almost, like at the same time, and that's like the whole Purim concept. So what you're saying is basically like, it's like what it sounds like to me is like, it's reminding me of this, is like that it's like you're rooted, we're all kind of these rooted beings that are plugged into Hashem underneath, and yet on the surface we're just kind of walking around doing these things. And also another thing I wanted to say from before that I just forgot was that pasuk about the Adam Eitz HaSadeh thing. So it's talking about a war. In other words, it's talking about fruit trees.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to chop down fruit trees, because it says Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh levod mipanecha b'matzor, that it's like a fruit tree. Like is it a person that you should be cutting it down in the face of like your war machine? And so like if you think about that, like the focus on fruit trees there is that like that's basically what we are. We're basically making fruit, and like we're making things in the world, and that's like our normal life process that we do all the time. And then we're supposed to be rooted in Hashem, and then we go around sharing the fruit that we create with each other.
And trees don't have frontal lobes to confuse them and overthink things and take them away from their purpose of existence, which is to just channel Hashem's light and create beautiful fruit.
Right.
And that's part of what we're trying to tap into on Purim. We're trying to turn down the control of the frontal lobe of reasoning and logic and let Hashem's light flow through us. And I think it was episode 2 when we were talking about the breath, we were talking about how the practice of inviting the awareness of your breath to flow through your entire body. And what happens when we take this idea of the rooting, the grounding into Bishvat, and invite that awareness through the breath, through presence, through the mind, through visualization, and really allow it to expand through all of us, through our entire being, and go into Purim like that.
Right. Yeah.
Right? We're channeling Hashem's light, Hashem's love, and connecting in that way, both to ourselves and to our neighbors, our family, our community.
Right. So I guess what I would want to ask next, just in terms of like tactics or techniques, is like, let's say a person is shy or like has like, and we're all shy in some form, like especially with new people, but even with friends that maybe we want to become more close to, and we deliberately make them like a special mishloach manos that, like, you know, instead of just kind of a bag of candy, like you actually go and make some things and then you give it. So how would, like, I guess, what are some good mental or like, it could be thought-based techniques or also breathing techniques or just things to think about to sort of become more, both more comfortable, but almost like to actualize this idea, like when doing those kinds of actions, like going to visit people, and then like how can we become more like okay with ourselves as we do it instead of feeling insecure with new people, like things like that. Do you have any good yoga techniques or something like that?
I mean, grounding.
Right.
Grounding. So hand at the heart. We call this home base. One hand at the heart, one hand at the abdomen. And then just checking in with yourself. Allow yourself a moment before you're interacting with someone else to channel, what is the purpose of this giving that I'm about to do?
Right.
Is it me, my ego, that's giving this? Or am I fulfilling Hashem's desire to be connecting in this way? And then from that place of really setting your intention, and this physical contact of the body helps to calm the nervous system. So we get out of the frontal lobe and go back into that channeling. And then the hands are an extension of the heart, right?
Right.
And letting that giving come from the heart.
Right.
Come from a place of awareness and intention. Yeah.
Right.
And then if you're comfortable, make eye contact.
Right.
Smile.
That's really what this is.
Look at the person who's behind those eyeballs.
Right.
that is receiving your gift, and allow that moment of actual connection. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously when I ask it, like, you know, I'm asking for myself, essentially. I mean, and the reason is because I think that it's, like, we all, it's many times, and this is something just to think about, like, when you're receiving Mishloach Manos also, it's actually sometimes even more important when receiving them, because I think that a lot of us, we care a lot, and maybe we don't always show it. In other words, it's hard to, like, go up to somebody that you know somewhat, that you care about, and you're trying to do something nice for them, and genuinely show that you care by giving them some kind of special mishloach manos, like we're saying. Yeah. And then, so when you're on the receiving end, to like think like this might mean something to them, and I should think about that. And again, I know there's also, you know, one of the struggles with mishloach manos, when you receive, you have to give them back.
No, so I was about to say, I'm actually I'm pretty makpid. I give like 1 or 2 mishloach manot. I try to emphasize more matanot levyonim. I think that in our modern society we've fallen into the pitfall of overemphasizing, making sure all of our close friends get the fanciest, nicest things, and like, how much money are we spending on mishloach manot, and how much money are we spending on matanot levyonim? Yeah. Like, part of my Purim prep, and I make sure to do this with my son, is we go and we make sure that we have cash available to give out to people, and we go to the makolet and help pay off people's tabs. Awesome. And they know who can't pay off their tabs, and like go and give matanot levyonim, right? And over the past few years, as I've really been adopting this this approach of giving less mishloach manot, I've had people come and they give me, and it's been a huge practice for me to be able to receive and let go of the expectation that I'm supposed to give. Because if there's an assumption from me or from them that I have to give something, is that really giving?
Right. Such a good example.
It's not really giving. Right. It's we're going to trade now. I give you something, you give me something. But if you really want to allow the person to give to you, you have to receive it without any expectation of anything except for receiving and letting that be. And it's a really beautiful thing that happens when you get over the discomfort of your internal dialogue of, shoot, I'm supposed to give them something, I don't have anything to give them. Awesome. Yeah, but it makes the giving that much more meaningful, and the receiving.
Yeah, I mean, it's reminding me like Rav Ashlag has like this in his introduction to the Zohar. He has like this analogy that he uses to explain, because like Hashem basically he's mashpia, which like means like he's bestowing, like he's always trying to give. And then like we're kind of designed initially in a format of just what's called to be like mekablim. We're just and he has like these two different kinds of likabel. It's like there's just like pure receiving where you just receive in order to take, and then there's like likabel amanat lashpia, and he basically outlines this analogy of two friends, and one is trying to give to the other one. And the other one, he protests, like he refuses it, and that's actually that's the barrier of tzimtzum that Rav Ashlag is trying to convey in the analogy. It's like being able to say no, and saying I don't want to receive your gift, because then when I end up saying yes, ultimately, so now I'm doing something for you by receiving your gift, because you want to give it so much, so then I'm actually giving you something in return by receiving it, and that's I think like that's really what you're saying. In other words, like actually, and I don't want to say it in too harsh of a language, but it's almost like if you feel that you need to give something back because someone gave you mishloach manos, then you're actually not effectively doing the receiving in order to give. In other words, because you're trying so hard to be a mashpia also, to give something, that you're not letting the other person be the giver in the situation, and you being the receiver who is giving through receiving. And that's really the dynamic we're trying to create here, which is that in order to create bonds, like when Hashem tries to create bonds with us, so he extends his light in that analogy that Rav Ashlag is using, he shares himself with us, and then our gift to Hashem is that we receive, and by receiving in that way we're giving. It's not that we give something back to Hashem separately, that we're giving you something. It's the very receiving is the gift. Yeah. And I think the way you just said it now is so striking for me. It was just very sharp, because we all kind of know there's like this social contract vibe of like, you gave to me, I have to give to you, I feel bad. And it's like you have to actually, like, speaking of like insecurities, and like having a hard time going up to someone that you don't know as well, or someone that you want to get to know better, or even people that you do know but you don't give them gifts that often, whatever, like that's one struggle. But like I think this is actually harder, and I'm just thinking about it. It's like that's actually a bigger challenge.
It's sort of like the chesed of Gvura.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. The chesed of Gvura. Yeah. It's by holding yourself in, you're actually able to give, and really making what they did matter. That's like so striking. And I feel like it's bigger. It's like an actual. It's a harder avoda. Maybe it's just nowadays because we have, thank God, we have a lot to give. We have a lot of food that we give out and whatever. As you said, it's like people spend a lot of time making mishloach manos. Maybe that's why this is a bigger challenge, because we're so used to, I invite you, you have to invite me back, like that kind of culture. And really the avoda here is the not giving. That's really cool. Yeah, I love that. Wow.
Yeah.
It just blew my mind. Yeah. Okay, so I guess maybe like, so how does this lead into Pesach? That's probably a good thing. Is that too much to do that all in one episode?
No, because it's all so connected. It's all building on one another. And if we go into Purim, recognizing that Purim is the preparation for Pesach, how is that going to affect our Purim? Right? It's context. On the one hand, we are fully immersed in Purim, but we're also drawing from Tu B'Shvat and setting intentions already for Pesach.
Right.
So if Pesach is about freedom, about leaving Yetziat Mitzrayim, leaving the Metzarim, right? So how do we become free? How do we create expansiveness in the narrowest?
Right. It's really, I mean, when we're just articulating it this way, it's what's really cool about that is that it's not, it's just less powerful when you look at these things in isolation.
Yeah.
And when you think about the Chazal that you opened with about how 30 days before the Chag preparing, I think often we think about it halachically, like especially with Pesach, right? It's like learning all of Hilchos Pesach, trying to like remember what you're supposed to do, and then not being super successful at that because it's so complicated. But like the
energetic preparation that is available to us to tap into it takes it to a whole different place.
Right. And it's big picture.
Yeah.
So when it's big picture, again, like sometimes people have asked me, like Hilchos Pesach seems like it's so neurotic. Like there's like crumbs of bread. Like there's so many interesting sugyas about like mice taking bread weird places, and these are like very complicated sugyas and
or 3-year-olds.
Right, or 3-year-olds maybe more common. It's like if there's two houses and you're not sure which one the mouse went into with the bread. Like what do you do then? Like, and these are like very specific scenarios. Right. But like you can get so lost in the details of that, and you forget what the big picture is here. And I think this macro framework really.
I mean, that's how we work with with health. You can't. People come in and tell me, "Oh, I have a horrible back pain."
Right.
I'm like, okay, let's take a look at your knee and let's work on your upper back. They're like, "No, I said my lower back is hurting me." I'm like, "Yeah, but there's stuff going on in your knees and there's stuff going on in your upper back, and if we're just focusing on the lower back, you're not going to feel." We're not going to address the underlying issue, which is causing you pain.
Right.
So you can't work with just one part of you. You can't, and that's your physical body. That's time. That's space. We're holistic beings.
Right.
So we want to. I was always taught that we learn Torah klal prat klal. Right. So we need to have a big picture view of what's going on. We need to zoom in, understand all the details, but then we need to take that big picture view again and see how are all of these little details of what we're doing throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, how are they all connected? Because they are all connected, because that's how this world in Hashem works.
Right. That fluidity is really like, that's the cure for the Eitz Hadas. In other words, like the ability to go up and down the ladder and be in it and then above it and in it and then looking at it from every angle and having the flexibility to not get embedded in one particular layer, and then that actually causes mitzarim because you're stuck in some space, and then it's like, well, and even if that space is useful, but at a certain point you just start to stagnate because your mind, your neshama, like your body also knows when it's trapped somewhere, and even if you got into that space for a reason, you're exploring some detail, which is probably an important detail, but then if you kind of stay there too long, and then you lose the rest of the picture, you start to experience the dis-ease of that, and it causes real damage. So that makes a lot of sense. So I guess so. What's your take on wine on Purim? How would you think about that as both a person who loves Purim, loves Torah, but also
I do love Purim.
Thinks about it in terms of body relationships, like how to drink in a useful way.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who does not drink wine throughout the year, I absolutely drink wine on Purim and lots of water, and I use it as a tool to be able to access that, to turn off the control of the mind and go into the heart, go into the gut, and it opens us up for connection in a completely different way. We're not supposed to get
wasted.
Yes, that is.
Which is the perfect word, because what is the word wasted? It's like, it's basically taking what you are and just burning it.
Yeah. A little bit tipsy.
Right.
A little bit tipsy throughout the day. That doesn't require a tremendous amount of wine, of alcohol. But we want to keep ourselves in a state where, I am more smiley, and I am more freely just wanting to share brachot and smiling and giving hugs to my friends and being in connection.
Right.
With both a different part of myself that's a little bit less inhibited, and also open to seeing things from a different perspective, and I understand people who don't, and I totally respect for all sorts of different reasons. People who choose not to drink, whether because of age or personal experience, there are legitimate reasons to not partake in drinking alcohol on Purim. But at the right age, in the right environment, with the right intentions, and that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Because if you go into Purim and you start drinking just to get wasted, you're completely missing the point. But if you're setting your intention to be connected to Hashem, to let Hashem's light and love flow through you, to really feel that expansiveness that is possible, that I am an endless being, roots going all the way down into the earth, and my highest potential reaching all the way up to Shemayim, that's what we need to be able to begin exploring the opening of the narrow passages to lead us to freedom. But if we don't know where we're starting from and where we're trying to get we get lost.
You're drinking here, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess usually when I talk about alcohol, so I think the intention is like exactly how you said it. It's the most central in terms of alcohol in Purim. And oftentimes, I've obviously been at a lot of different Purim Sudas and hosted Purim Sudas where there's people who get very drunk and then they start to cry.
Yeah.
And that's actually like usually what I'll say either before Purim or sometimes in the setting. I don't usually say it because someone's crying in the moment. You're not going to tell them this, but what I think a lot of the time what that is, or what it can be at least, is that it's actually the avoda of Tisha B'Av. In other words, the Tisha B'Av is that there's something about life that is very painful, and we hide it inside all the time because it hurts. And in Tisha B'Av, the example there is that Hashem, the base makes us destroyed is basically the equivalent of Hashem dying, because it's like Hashem's manifest presence in the world in a kli, which is what a body is, which is why we have all these avelos minhagim around Tisha B'Av. So, and we basically live with that pain all the time.
Yeah.
We might not even remember that we're living with it. And then when you get drunk, so then suddenly pain that you have buried comes out. So,
absolutely.
And that fits for Tisha B'Av, but not for Purim. So,
yes and no. I think that there's absolutely a place for that on Purim.
Yeah.
Every year, I plug back into Migdalos, where I studied for many years, and we have the tradition as women. We don't have the chiyuv to be drinking during the daytime, and as wives and mothers, we obviously don't have the opportunity to be engaged with this during the daytime. So, in order to allow the husbands to be fulfilling this mitzvah during the daytime, at nighttime there's an opportunity for women to get together, and we dance the entire night, and there's drinking of wine in abundance, and tefillah, and it's the most beautiful experience. And there's always a point where there's tremendous crying, but from a place of love and connection. Yeah. And part of what the wine is doing is it's shifting our inhibition and allowing us to feel all the feelings and express all the feelings that we're usually too
walled off,
too proper, too needing to fit into what makes other people comfortable to actually access. And I think it's an important and valuable thing to be doing, not on our own. Like we're not supposed to, like last year a lot of people were doing Suda on their own.
Yep.
We are not meant to be doing that.
Yes,
that is not how Hashem designed this to be.
Literally what we were saying before about the Mishalas Manos.
And when you're able to hold space or join a person in that pain, in that sadness, it's a little bit less lonely, and it has the opportunity to transform it.
Yeah, that I think that would be a very pure and I think that's like the most Torah way I can imagine of channeling the loss of Hashem that is a different time of year into, I guess you could say, the tikkun of Purim, as we said earlier, is like to have Hashem while also being in the world, like simultaneously balanced, to undo the distortion of Das Tovara. Like you basically are like able to be with Hashem in your normal world space. So that is the tikkun for the Tisha B'Av side. So that's actually a great way of saying it. Right, that's literally what it is. Right, exactly. Yeah, so I guess, and I guess just in terms of the mechanics of it, what I would want to just add is like you already said this, not really adding, but just like the drinking in its function is that it kind of like makes our mind mitushtash. It's like you start to see how like the way that things look, it's almost like a psychedelic experience, but like a small, very small one. It's like there's like things that seem like they're one way all the time. Again, the lenses that we have. This is the way the world is. We see it as it is. That's what we tend to think. We get embedded in whatever particular narrow spaces we find ourselves backed into by accident. And then when you drink a little bit, so then it starts to shake that up, and you feel like you could be different. Like you said, right? You could just behave differently in a way that's not destructive. Just be different, and you can access different modes of being that are just not as easily accessible, and that loosens the perceptual spaces, and that actually then acts as a trigger for freeing ourselves, for actually becoming a new version of ourselves, which is literally what, that's the freedom of Pesach is about trying to unleash the newness and reassessing yourself to be a reboot almost of yourself if you want, like depending on where you're at and what you want to be, and just to sort of let go of all just because you were one way yesterday doesn't mean you have to be exactly the same thing today. So I really usually I'm a little like when I deal with people who are crying on Purim, so often there's a lot of crying from a place of failure, where it's like feelings of like I'm a failure, and like I think that there's obviously that's every feeling has a place and should be understood. But I also sometimes it ends up eclipsing. It's like, yeah, of course, we're all failures in a lot of ways, but like that's part of the normalcy where now Hashem is in the failure with us on Purim. So it's like feel the pain, okay, but like don't forget to take the next step and take that pain and be like, it's okay. Like even though it hurts, like that's part of my story, and like it's not just like an isolated thing where I'm a failure, I'm terrible.
But it's part of my story. It is not me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I am not a failure.
Right.
I have had failures. Yeah. That's a really important distinction.
Right. Because one is very distorted. In other words, it's das tovara. It's like you're seeing yourself purely in one way, and your story is a flow, and there's so much that's there. So, yeah, I think that's why it's called getting wasted. Like we said before, like when you do drink too much, so maybe in some cases at least, it's because we feel like we are a failure, so we're drinking from das tovara instead of like using alcohol to cure and to loosen the distorted or the smaller perspectives. We're actually drinking to escape having to face them, and that's a waste, because like if you're hurting from thinking that you're a failure, the answer isn't to just numb yourself from it. It's to face it and realize that perception is part of a much larger truth, that if you can access it, then you don't see yourself that way anymore, and then you can live with your mistakes while also becoming greater. So
if we bring this back to the tree, right? So if the preparation for Purim is, since the preparation for Purim is Tu B'Shvat, before we start this process of drinking, really we can become aware of the fact that I'm still growing.
Right.
I am still growing. I have not revealed my flowers, my fruit. I have more to give. I have more to grow. I'm still in the process of becoming. Right? And if we can go in with that intention and that mindset, that embodied awareness, then we can flow.
Right. That's, I guess, just when we say that Hashem is Melech Meimit U'Mechayeh U'Matzmiach Yeshua, like to be Matzmiach Yeshua is like, it's a process where to be Matzmiach anything is like, there's a lot of patience, there's a lot of destruction in the middle of growing something, because pieces of it don't make it or die in order for it to become further expressed. So yeah, again, like that's why Purim is Olam HaBa. In other words, like that's the theme of Olam HaBa, is that everything it's Olam Shekol Hazman Ba. In other words, it's like you can look at it from a place of process where you can see that this is a story, as opposed to Olam Hazeh, which is literally like, it means Olam of this. It's like it's the this perspective. So it's just very exciting to imagine. Like, can you imagine if every day was actually Purim? And again, obviously it's so fun too.
I do like to think,
but like like the Gemara says, like the people who are Bnei Olam HaBa are the jokesters, like the comedians.
Yeah. And
like the reason for that is because the comedy is literally this. It's like it's taking things that are opposites, like, and then having them collide. And then you see like this bizarre phenomenon that you didn't expect. And if you're detached enough, you have to have some gvura in comedy, because if you empathize too much with the weird situation that you're seeing, then you'll feel feelings instead of laughing. But like, incongruity of somebody who's walking and slips and falls. So people may have made comedy sketches out of that. So there's two ways you could perceive it. You could perceive it from a distance, in which case it's very incongruous. Like, people are not supposed to be on the ground, not supposed to be falling. So then if you're distant from it, then you're going to be you'll laugh at it. And if you're not distant from it, you're emotionally involved in it, then you'll empathize. And of course, in real life, somebody falls, you're not supposed to laugh at that. But if somebody makes a comedy sketch out of it, there's a reason why it's funny. It's funny because it's incongruous. And that's the same paradox of Purim, that you have like these two things. There's like the regular world in all of its randomness. Like literally that's the Purim are like, there's so many seemingly random things that happen that are almost laughable at how wacky they are. And underneath that, there is this ocean of direction and purpose and planning, and it's all going somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's like a wildly incongruous set of things that just do not go together, and yet they are part of a seamless oneness. And Olam HaBa is all that in its fully unified form. Like, that's wild.
Yeah. So if we experience Purim on an intellectual level, we're kind of missing it.
Yeah, because it's a totality.
But the more we experience it on an embodied level, and when I say embodied, I mean bringing your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic awareness into what it is, into the intentions that you're setting, into the giving, the receiving, all of the mitzvot of the day. The body remembers.
Mm-hmm. You're imprinting it.
You are imprinting it, and you can recreate and reconnect to that experience throughout the year.
Right.
And so living Purim throughout the year suddenly doesn't seem so far-fetched.
Right.
Like, we're not supposed to be getting drunk every single day. That would be horrible for us. But to be in this connection of awareness of grounding. Let's go back to our previous episode. We were talking about propping ourselves, and we're talking about alignment, right?
Right.
And the balance between propping, collapsing, and yielding. So this quality of yielding is exactly what we're talking about with the roots. That there's a two-way relationship. You're letting the force of gravity hold you, right? And you're letting the support of the earth hold you. And we're trying to find the most effortless existence within that relationship. And when we find that, we're letting Hashem flow through us.
Right.
Right? So we need to know where we're grounded in order to receive that support and be able to expand up. And then we have the possibility of opening up the constrictions in our jaw, in our throat, in our mind, in our diaphragm, in our gut, in our pelvis, everything that we hold onto out of fear, out of trauma, out of whatever it is that all of the feelings, anger.
Yeah, a lot of
right?
reasons to hold on to that.
A lot of reasons. But when we allow ourselves, when we really experience Purim, the joy of Purim, and joy I mean, what happens when you think of joy in your body? When you start feeling joy, there's excitement, but we start to smile, and there's this widening that takes place, right? There's a widening. You feel it in your eyes. You can feel it in your lips. You can even feel it in your ears if you're really paying attention. And you automatically want to open up and like, it's Purim, right? Your hands open up. Everything becomes wider and more expansive.
Right.
Oh, that's freedom. You can take a deep breath. You can...
Yeah, what you're like, it sounds like basically what we're doing is we're leaning. In other words, by leaning, I mean like we're leaning on the roots. Like, think about your roots as being your...
Leaning happens on Pesach.
Right, sorry, I'm getting confused there for a second. But like, you have these roots that are in the ground, instead of trying to use it like the way you spoke about, like you spoke about in the alignment episode, if we try so hard to almost like control things with like the upper part of ourselves, and like if you just let yourself lean on your source.
I'm going to offer you a different word.
Yeah.
Yield.
I like lean though. I'm imagining like trees, because trees, they just kind of like, no matter how much they move upstairs, like they're just kind of
they're yielding
embedded.
to gravity. They're yielding to the wind.
All right,
we're
I'll go
allowing
with yield.
ourselves. Yeah.
I'll just
Yes.
I'm gonna grow right now. I'm gonna just change it to yield. I guess I also wanted to say like the that line in the Megillah that like everyone, because like we say it very intensely. It's like because the trup of it is ki macharesh tacharishi, and the line is basically like ki macharesh tacharishi beis hazos. Like Mordechai is trying to he has an in to try to save all of us because his family member is now the queen of the entire all these countries, these provinces. So like he wants he's trying to control the situation. It's like he's like, I have this connection. I have to go and use her to like convince the king to stop. And hopefully, because she's married to the king, she'll have enough influence and power to convince him. So what he should say, if that's what he's trying to do, is he should say to her, like, if you're silent during this time, like we're all gonna die. Like you have to save us. Go in and we have to stop this. He doesn't say that though. He says like the most bizarre thing that somebody in that situation would ever be expected to say. He says, like salvation for the Jews will come from somewhere else. So if you're silent now, that's fine. It will still be saved. And the throw in is you and your family's house you'll disappear. And like there's a few deep layers to what that means, but like definitely the core principle is I think what you're saying. In other words, what he's basically saying is I'm not going to try to force the situation. Like you're in a certain place, in a certain time, in a certain role. So like you have a choice now. Do you want to be the hero or the villain? Like what role do you want to play? But like I'm just giving you that information because I want you to have the choice so you can decide. You can actively know what's going on. But like if you choose to be the villain, which is the do nothing approach, because that's still villainous. So okay, like someone else will step up and be the hero. It will happen because Hashem's taking it there. So Mordechai can be calm. I don't have to be like attempting so hard to make everything happen the way that I need it to happen because I know what should be. Like I can lean on Hashem on my roots.
Exactly.
So it's really that.
Yeah. I was listening. My friend Tehila was sharing beautiful insight on exactly this. That according to modern psychology, if you're trying to like convince someone and encourage someone to do something, step out of their comfort zone and accomplish something really important, like we would probably say like, yeah, you can do this and you have everything that you need and I'm here supporting you and you got this. And like, that's really not what Mordechai says.
Not at all.
Not at all. He's like, do it or don't. Like Hashem
it's on you. You make the choice.
It's on you. Do this. And if not, Hashem's going to take care of it.
Right.
And that's where we really see the transformation happening with Esther, where she goes from passive things happening to her to taking charge and really v'nafochu.
Right.
And we don't make these huge transformations by coddling.
That's so interesting. I never thought about how that's the point where she transforms like that.
That's where she transforms.
Like even they describe her in the Gemara, which is a very difficult term to ever face about a person, but she's called Karka Olam, essentially. In other words, because she gets into this relationship with the king, and he's physically with her, and she doesn't want any of this, right? She didn't ask for this, and that phrase literally means you're just the ground. You're a non-entity, and then she and when Chazal say that, so usually it's taught in a certain context to describe like how she dealt with these violations, and maybe after that, the first time that happened, then later on she went to him more willingly in order to try to seduce him. But like, and we think about the terminology, they're much more about like, sort of like her, just what it's like to be a person, a woman in that situation. But I think that now, as you said that, like the term clicked into my head suddenly, and I was like, I think they're saying that term for a reason. Like they're trying to show you that she was first this passive presence, and then she went, and it's not just about the halachic implication that maybe now she can't be with Mordechai if we assume that they were married, because now she went willingly as opposed to being violated. It's actually telling you there's a shift here where she at first is just a quiet, passive character, and then it's like everything is tactics. And by the way, the tactics continue in a very manipulative way. In other words, all the things that she says to Achashverosh, if you go through the story, we don't have to examine the whole thing now, obviously, but like there's all these little games that she does, word games. The two different parties are all designed. And then she tells him, "I want you." Like he's obviously very interested when she comes to him, and he's, because usually she has not been interested in him. Suddenly she invites him to a private party, and then she says, "I want you to come with another guy," and who is it? It's Haman, and she's basically building this case to try to get Achashverosh so riled up that when she finally pulls the trigger on it, which does happen, hopefully he'll just execute him. And you even see in the story what happens is Achashverosh actually gets up enraged when he finds out that Haman is the guy, but then he doesn't execute him. He leaves, goes out into the garden, and that's probably the scariest part of the story, because all her manipulations, they almost fell apart right then. And then instead, but then when he comes in, by coincidence, again, coincidences happen, Haman came to Esther where she was sitting on the bed to lie down before, to bow before her and kneel to try to get her to get him off the hook. And then Achashverosh sees that, and that's already too much. And he literally goes right into a rage and gets him killed because he thinks that he's trying to jump her on the spot. And it's there's so many little manipulative things that are going on there that she was trying to set up. And you see, this is a person who is thinking tactically. She goes from just being just a person who's there to I am taking control as much as I can and trying to work this to get it where it needs to go. And that's also really doing things, and doing what she can do. She's trying to do what she can do.
And her that potential was always there.
Yeah.
When did it manifest? When she got out of her own way. When we believe that it's all up to us, that we are in control, that we are making things happen, we can shut down. Right? But when we go into this place of channeling Hashem, and this is, use me to increase your light in this world, use the skills, the talents, the strengths.
Tactics, even the mental manipulative tactics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Use all these gifts that you have chosen to give me, and let me channel your light. And that's what we're trying to do on Purim.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do on Purim, and that's how we become free in Pesach.
Right.
To actually be ready to receive the Torah, to be, that's how we become free in Pesach, to begin the process of Sfirat HaOmer, of going through all the different midot to be ready for Pesach, to receive the Torah. But now I'm getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, that'll be the Pesach episode. I guess we can just wrap up because we're out of time. But I kind of want to stress the grounding and the physical manifestation or the control or the tactical side, just because I think often it's really hard to find the balance because it really is paradoxical. Letting go but also being active, these things are opposites. And in Esther's example, you really see how she did a lot of manipulations, and yet in the end Achashverosh still left the room and he went outside to cool off, and that might have led to a situation where he wouldn't have actually killed Haman. So even all of her tactics didn't really get her there. And then this other set of coincidences that she didn't really even plan, between Haman doing what he did, trying to get close to her, and then Charvona was there's this tree that you could hang him on, and we say Charvona Zachor Latov because it's so hard to know when do I yield and when do I do, and back and forth.
Yeah, so I'll just leave our listeners and viewers with a useful tip.
Yeah.
We can ask ourselves become aware of where you're supported by the earth. Right now, we're sitting. So my feet are on the ground. My bottom is on the chair. My back is leaning against the chair. Those are all places where I'm receiving support. And then we can go one step further and check in. Where is my body saying no to gravity? Where am I holding myself? And usually there are different physical parts of our body that we are holding.
Right.
And when we become aware of them, we allow the possibility of them saying yes to gravity and surrendering a little bit towards the support of the earth. And often when we allow that surrender to take place, a thought or a feeling will reveal itself. Oh, I was holding on to that thought or that belief or that fear or whatever it is. I can let it go a little bit, or I can view it from a different perspective. I can bring it into my conscious awareness and choose if I want to shift my perceptive of what that is. And that's how we allow transformation to take place. So if we're constantly holding ourselves, then we block ourselves off from that. But if we take the support that Tu B'Shvat is inviting us to connect to, and we open ourselves up to the heights of Purim, then we can, Be'ezrat Hashem, be zocha to experience the freedom
and you can actually do more. In other words, letting go, often we think of it as I won't be able to do as much because I'm not putting in as much effort. It's actually the other way. By letting go, it unlocks.
Because we're not collapsing. It's a two-way relationship.
Right.
I'm yielding into the support. There is weight going down. There is support coming up. There is a relationship. Receiving the breath and releasing what I no longer need.
Right.
Receiving the support of the earth and the support of gravity and letting Hashem flow through us.
Right.
That's
awesome. Yeah, Bezrat Hashem. All right, so to everybody, obviously, Purim Sameach. Thanks so much for joining us, and you can learn more about what Ariella does at yogawithariella.com.
And if these tools are helpful, please let us know. If you have any questions, please be in touch.
Yeah, reach out in the comments on YouTube, or you can also just go straight to yesodblocks.com. We have a dedicated WhatsApp channel there where you can literally reach out. You can reach me directly on my phone, but questions for Ariella can also come through that. I'm happy to send them to her and then forward voice notes from her directly, all kinds of methods like that. So reach out, any feedback, questions you might have. Thanks so much for joining us, and Purim Sameach to everybody.
Good Purim!